We need more of everything. We need more people. I would argue we still need more restaurants, maybe a more different variety, but more people, number one. There are amenities here that you can't get outside of the city, and there are prices here that are lower than you could ever get outside the city. I think the answer is more, and that's good.
This is Catalyst, the stories behind the people building a better York. Welcome to Catalyst. I'm Rebecca Hanlon of Our York Media. Coming up, we'll be chatting with Dylan Bauer of Royal Square Development and Construction. We'll talk about his ventures in Chilly Dilly, the last conversation he had with Louis Appell, and his response to being called a gentrifier and a whitewasher. Before we get into that, here's a quick story about a York College student making a difference in York, brought to you by our title sponsor, York College of Pennsylvania's Center for Community Engagement. What if you could provoke change that impacted an entire community? For Zach Sneyer, a biology major at York College of Pennsylvania, his experience as an intern with the Gladfelter Institute for Public Policy may do just that. Through the Institute, he's researching lead exposure and its impact in York, involving everything from crime to educational attainment and income. His goal is to make a case for legislative change in York City. Zach, what has to change in York for us to see improvements related to lead exposure?
First of all is awareness of the issue. Many people understand that lead itself is bad, all the many health effects associated with it. Of those people, they understand that paint is associated with lead. But what people in the county, not many realize, is that it's still an issue facing our community. As an intern, we looked at some things, including educational attainment, income, crime rates, and as well as the health effects. Many, like I said, know about the health effects, but few think about the effect it has on the crime in our community and the income and the long-term effect on the community through those things.
So this project gives you a chance to leave a mark in York, even as a college student, and that opportunity may be motivation enough for you, but what do you think will motivate others to adopt change?
I think first and foremost would be the health effects. Everyone cares about their neighbor, and lead has a particular effect on the health of youth of the county. But beyond that, you can make an argument for the financial impact on the community, and it's not just a present-day impact, it's going to be an impact for many years. We look at the cost of society. Some studies support the argument that the increased crime would result in a high cost. And for many in the legislature or in legislative abilities, that would be a great argument for a change as well.
So thank you so much for stopping by to share your project with us, and we hope you continue to strive for change that betters our community.
Thank you.
This season of Catalyst is supported by Stock & Leader Attorneys at Law. At Stock & Leader, our attorneys provide more than legal advice. We provide first-to-know expertise and a client-centered service through a collaborative team approach. We're more than your lawyers. We're your complete resource for legal insight and your partner for a fast-paced, changing world. When decisions matter, Stock & Leader. And now it's time to meet our catalyst. Today, Dylan Bauer is the president of development at Royal Square Development and Construction, who's behind much of the visual progress we've seen popping up around downtown York, from Revy Flats and the old Weinbraun building to some of the spaces in Royal Square, like the Bond building and Taste Test. But before he was flipping buildings, he was head of the Chilly Dilly's ice cream truck enterprise. Can you talk a little bit, Dylan, about how that got started for you?
Sure. Well, thanks for having me on the show. It's really cool. I'm glad you're doing this. This is fun. Chilly Dilly's. Chilly Dilly's was my first real company. I had little companies when I was in high school, like mowing lawns and stuff. But my name being Dylan, I started Chilly Dilly's Ice Cream in 2004. I bought my first truck out of New York, and I saved up. I had $5,000 saved up. I bought it, and I made it just outside of Philly before it broke down. At the time, this was when I had my Motorola Razr, I think. I wasn't pre-iPhone.
Yeah.
And I was calling everybody I know to be like, yeah, man, I bought the truck. I'm coming down the interstate. My phone died. So my truck died. My cell phone was dead. And I actually used one of those solar-powered phones on the side of the road.
Oh, wow.
And I got it towed back. The truck, the mechanic said you should never have been driving this thing. So I'm surprised you made it as far as you did.
Wow.
And I got it home and scrapped it for $500. So
Wow.
my first week in business, I lost all my cash. But I went to, eventually I went through a few banks, and our new bank downtown, York Traditions Bank, gave me my first loan for $24,000. And I bought a 1971 Ford Good Humor truck, which I drove for, it was in my company for 7 years. But
Okay.
yeah, it was my baby.
So how far did you get with Chilly Dilly's?
Well, like I said, we were in business for 7 years. In my peak, we had 26 or 28 employees. We had two companies. We had Chilly Dilly's and we had Sun Snow. Sun Snow was a solar-powered snowball stand that we put in parking lots outside of like giant anchored centers or grocery stores. And we would use solar power to power the machine and produce snowballs. And it was a really cool system. I had them down to cup count system because theft is one of your biggest problems in business, especially in restaurants. And I could count the cups. I knew how many cups were in there when we started and how many were at the end of the day. And I told them, you eat as many snowballs as you want, but if there's a cup missing too many times, you're out of here.
Oh,
and it
wow.
worked. So I did that, and I eventually I realized that I made more money. It's true. I made more money as a single operator than I did when I had employees. When I was in college, I would gross around $40,000 to $45,000 in revenue, and I was taking home $20,000 to $25,000 profit off of that. When I graduated college and I bought 3 more trucks, we had 4 trucks on the road. Mr. Big Shot here took himself out of the driver's seat because I don't need to drive a truck. You know, I got these 4 trucks and employees. We did just over $300,000 in revenue, and I, the business owner, made I think $6,000.
Wow.
So I had to move back in with my parents' basement and that whole thing. But I learned and grew the company for a while until we sold it in 2012. I
Okay.
think.
So when you were 25, we had talked before about how that was a rough year for you and a learning experience. You were sued by Central Market. You were
Yep.
sued by Dairy Queen.
Yep.
And you were practically broke.
Mm-hmm.
What were some of the business lessons that you learned?
And my girlfriend of
that
8
time?
years dumped me.
Well, we weren't going to mention that for,
No, it was fine. It was one of those moments where you learned a lot about. I remember, and also I didn't mention this, but I remember I had to get my mom to take me to the dental hygienist or whatever you go to get your wisdom teeth taken out.
Yeah.
And I was like, everything, because you're going to go under with anesthesia.
Right.
And I'm like, my roommate was moving out of my apartment. So it was all these things where I'm like, well, I guess it's just going to be what it is. But yeah, it was an interesting time. And I'm glad that happened because it forced me to kind of go back and talk to some people that had helped me along the way, whether I knew it or not. One of the ventures we had at Chilly Dilly's is we opened a stand at Central Market. We actually made ice cream products like little ice cream sandwiches and Nutty Buddies. They were the best Nutty Buddies ever. And but what it did is it leveraged me into these relationships. Like I met a friend of mine who's still a friend. I saw him Saturday actually, Bill Swartz.
Okay.
He was one of the first guys to really charge for downtown. And he was the one that said, Dylan, you should get into real estate. And I was like, I don't know, man. That's not me. I don't want to be. I pictured real estate as baking cookies, having open houses. And he said, no, commercial real estate. And that kind of pushed me into that world. And but it took, I think, all those things to sort of happen for me to say, okay, let me look at my situation. I remember this. The Phils were in the we were in the playoffs. And I was all down in the dumps because of all these things. So I went to Philly, and I stayed with some friends of mine who worked during the day. And I went to the Locust Bar at 10th and Locust and watched playoff baseball. And just hung out for the day until my buddies got off work. And I just thought through everything. And I thought, you know what? I can get out of this. And I kind of made a plan at that little divey bar. And then ended up selling both my companies that following spring after liquidating all the assets, and then eventually finding a job at Rock Commercial.
Okay. So before we get into your real estate career,
Mhm.
which was kind of the next big phase of your life, while you were still a vendor at Central Market, you met someone who was a pretty prominent character
Sure.
in New York that many people have not had the opportunity to be as close to as perhaps you were. Introduce us to that person and how you first met him.
Well, we're talking about Mr. Louis Appell, and Mr. Appell was, I heard about him as a kid. I heard of his name. I remember being young enough to hear the Susquehanna Communications guy talking with my parents about the sale of Suscom, and they sold. I think it sold for $1.2 billion with a B to Comcast. But so I heard of this man, and I always heard that he went by Mr. Appell. Even as like his closest advisors, it was Mr. Appell. So I was working Central Market, and I had my this girl Megan working for me, and I remember seeing who I thought was Mr. Appell, and thinking, oh my gosh, like Mr. Appell he probably never comes to Central Market. So I pulled up his image online, and I said, Megan, I want you to go over and see if that guy is the same as this guy on the laptop. She's like, what am I doing? Just do it. So she goes and she comes back. She's like, Dylan, I don't know. I said, all right, well, this is probably my only chance. I had no idea the man went there almost every single week. So I went up and I said, excuse me, sir, are you Mr. Appell? This is like my second week after being open. And he said, I am. I said, my name's Dylan. I had this new ice cream stand here at Central Market called Chilly Dilly's. I think you bought some of my product today. I just wanted to introduce myself and hope for a chance maybe to ask you some questions about downtown and business. And he paused and he said, sure. 845-2300. Give me a call Monday. And I'm like, okay. And I ran away like I just got, a girl's phone number. I mean, I was so excited and happy. And I did. I called. I set up a meeting. And I remember going there, and I met with him in his conference room, little Fig Newtons on the table, little cups of water. And we spent better part of a half hour. I was telling him my story, where I was coming from. I asked him lots of questions about downtown and the businesses he was involved in, and he was very limited in his responses, but he was very cordial and nice. And I asked if I could follow up. And so I did a few months later, and I did that 2 or 3 times until I let him know. I said, Mr. Appell, I don't want anything. I really do enjoy your connection to downtown New York and your knowledge of business. If you don't mind me keeping this up, I'd love to keep bringing you ice cream and hearing your story. And so we did that almost on a quarterly basis. And I made these products called Chochos. It was a chocolate malt ice cream pop. They were real simple, but he loved them. So he'd buy them by the dozen. And even after I closed Chilly Dilly's, I had a friend of mine in Reading who made Chochos. Actually, the man that taught me the recipe. So I would order them once a year. I'd get a couple hundred, and I distribute them to people that I worked with, and I'd always take a good 50 or so to Mr. Appell's office.
Funny.
And he just thought it was the greatest thing.
Yeah.
So it was a neat experience to meet him, and what it did lead, what I realized, not asking for anything, how it paid off for me. I mentioned that time when I said, okay, what am I going to do? And I remembered Bill Swartz saying, you need to get into real estate, no commercial real estate.
Yeah.
I asked around, you need to talk to David Bodie at Rock. I heard this 2 or 3 times. I thought, all right, I'm going to go talk to Mr. Appell. And he's got, a Susquehanna real estate. I'm sure, he'll give me I'll get a new car and a fancy title or something. And I didn't really know they were winding down that part of the business as much. But when I asked him what he thought I should do, he said, you need to call Rock. I thought, all right. And he said, you want me to make the phone call for you? And I'm like, yeah, okay. So he called over to Rock. I got the interview the next day. I sat down with Mr. Bodie, and we spent a good 3-4 hours just doing the interview process, a couple of personality tests, and I had the job offer the very next day. So it was neat to have experienced the time with this man who I consider a role model. I spent that much time dedicated to York, and I really, truly just enjoyed his presence.
Yeah.
And so I went to work for Rock right thereafter. And I kept my relationship strong with Mr. Appell. And to maybe carry on to the next segue, at one point he said, do you know a fellow by the name Josh Hankey? And I said, yeah, I do. We occasionally have ran into each other before. And he said, you two should spend more time together. And that sort of pushed us together. And we when we tell the story, we're Miller Lite buddies. We just got Miller Lite at Bistro 19 and would talk about how this is wrong and that landlord should be doing this and we got to clean up that. And eventually, after 3 years at Rock, Josh said, hey, I could use your help over here. Would you come work for me? And I did that now 4+ years ago. And that was before a lot of what's happened downtown. We've successfully completed one new market tax credit project, and we're on our second completion. We're about to complete our second this December. So it's been a pretty fun ride.
When we had met previously, you told an interesting story about being in Royal Square District and doing something that would kind of warm the heart of Mr. Appell with something in particular that he really enjoyed.
Sure.
Where you put up the Christmas lights.
Yeah.
Why did that mean something to him, and why did you decide to do it in a way to kind of do something that was warming to him?
Well, what he's done for York is priceless. I mean, he's done so much. I mean, he bought the Strand twice. I think he saved it from becoming a parking lot.
Mm-hmm.
He bought the Yorktown, I think, 2 times or maybe just once. But he loved Christmas. That was his holiday. And to the extent that I remember being in the car with Josh when we got a phone call from him saying, "Why is there not a Christmas tree in the turret over on Duke Street?" And we're like, "I don't know, sir." And so we hung up the phone and we got on there, got over to Lowe's, and we got a Christmas tree up there as quickly as possible. So Christmas is always a big holiday for him, and it was so neat to see his passion for that. We had this idea. It was actually Alex Dwyer's idea, Alex DeVoe now, but she had the idea, and we quickly penciled it out, figured out the cost, found the help to do it, and we outlined all the doors and windows in Royal Square and Christmas lights. And then on Christmas Eve, his son and daughter, Lou and Helen, said, "Come on, Dad, we're going for a drive." And "Where are we going at 9 o'clock on Christmas Eve? Just trust me." And they came down Duke Street, and I remember we were waiting there, and he and Jody got out of the car, and it was almost, I mean, he was near tears. It was just so cool. And he just, "This is unbelievable. I can't believe this. How did you do this?" Mm. And we were so worried because the weeks before, you know, Mr. Appell would always drive around and go through the different neighborhoods, always checking on things. And I thought, how does he not realize all these electricians on ladders hanging Christmas lights? But we did. He never said anything, and I truly think he didn't pick up on it.
That's awesome.
And now we turn them on every year as a little bit of a tribute. So it's a neat thing we got to do, and he got to be a part of it there for a few years.
You've expressed admiration for a lot of his vision for what he wanted York to be. Mm-hmm. Did you feel any of that yourself when you started getting into the real estate?
Yes, very much so. So when I was at Chilly Dilly's, I was a cigarette smoker, and I did that for, I think, 10 or 12 years. Now I'm 3+ years without a cigarette. But stress, man, it's something I gravitated to. So when I was at Chilly Dilly's, and ice cream, we didn't sell a lot in the winter. We were a little slow.
Sure.
So I'd still be open, and I didn't want people to know I smoked. So I would wander around and look for new hiding spots. And I remember looking at certain buildings just thinking, what in this world? Why has no one done anything with this? Why is no one? And this is, again, 2010. So it's 8 years ago, but it's remarkable to see how far it's come. But yeah, I think that was a lot of my questions. And a lot of times when I spent time with him, I asked him, because he knew everything.
Yeah.
And he had a memory I can't believe. And he knew who bought what, when, how. So yeah, there was a lot of admiration of the buildings downtown. And I guess for myself, the vision, having gone to school in Philadelphia and enjoying travel and just always being kind of curious about how things work, I always had a question about why certain parts of our city were the way they were. I use the example when I compare. People often ask me where, you know, the difference in downtown and how far it's come. And my perspective is slightly limited. I mean, I opened up my ice cream stand in 2009, I think, downtown. And I remember the time that, and we stayed open year-round, even though we would make maybe $15, $20 on our first Friday in December.
Yeah.
But we would do these first Fridays. And I remember the time that Downtown Inc. was actually with clickers, like counters. They were keeping track of the number of people that would come through. And First Friday at that time was from Kimmons, the southeast corner of Beaver and Philly, down to the alleyway, which is now Sunrise Soap. That was it, about a half block. And we had 1,000 people come down and we were excited. And now we hit 10,000 people per month in stride to the point where Downtown Inc. is like, we can't track this.
Yeah.
And we can give a gauge, but we can't track it. So the vision was, I mean, I'm a small part in this whole thing, but there is vision there. And I think, to me, I look now to the first block of South Beaver Street, now the second block of South Beaver Street. You know, I've been a Green Bean customer for, I moved downtown in 2009 or 10. So I've been a Green Bean customer since previously when it was King and Beaver, the cafe, King and Beaver. And that was always an island to me. And now with the redevelopment of Weinbraum and Revy Flats, and the connectivity to where City Hall was, and now it's the police station.
Right.
We're watching that bend happen, and it's really exciting. And I encourage everybody to get involved. I mean, the properties on the 100 block of South Beaver Street, 100 block of South Pershing, they're beautiful, and they're great single-family homes that can be bought still at inexpensive prices. And that's what we got to do to change to move this city forward. We need more home ownership downtown, and it's really there because anytime a property comes online in the downtown, it's gone very quickly.
The area that you're talking about, Beaver Street there, there's been a lot of changes there most recently. You mentioned some of the buildings that have seen redevelopment, new things popped up. It ties in a little bit to your relationship with Louis, and the last conversation that you had with him. Mm-hmm. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, it's a sad. I mean, it's not sad. It's actually pretty great to have that moment. So I remember December of 15, there was a bit of a scare, but it wasn't clear, Mr. Appell's condition, and he would never, ever speak of it. And after he was better out of the hospital, January, February, he was still going to work, 9 to 3, 4 to 5 days a week, 90 years old. And he was going to work, and I'd see him because he drove right by my office. And it was, I'd like to say, he passed in June. I think it was probably late April or early May. Downtown Inc. Downtown Inc. and Royal Square were invited to his box for a day game, a baseball game in the day. And he was sitting out front, and he kept the box. He had one of those box scores. He kept every single. That's how he tracked the game. And so I remember seeing him there, and I had really exciting news because at the time, our company had been courting Isaac's famous sandwiches to move downtown, and it was hard to think that a regional chain would ever consider downtown. And we as a community had everybody there, invited them, and it was a really cool collaborative effort to get them to commit to downtown. And I remember going up to him and saying, "Hey, Mr. Appell, how are you?" And he said, "Hey, Chilly." And he always called me Chilly, was my nickname. I said, "Mr. Appell, we got Isaac's." He said, "What?" I said, "Yeah, it's not quite signed, but it's a deal. I can tell you that." He goes, "Get out of here. That's awesome. Great job." I said, "Thanks. How are you doing?" He said, "Well, I've got a beer, watching baseball in the middle of the day. I can't get much better than this." And it was great. I was like, "I'll talk to you soon." That was the last time I got to speak with him. And you know what? That's a great last way for me. I mean, he was just an inspiration on so many levels. So, and I truly wish now, 2+ years since his passing, that he could see what. It's not just the building stock that's changed; it's the overall community. Just excitement.
Yeah.
There's an overall energy that you feel when you're downtown, from the restaurants that are opening up to the people that are moving downtown to the businesses that are moving into the area, and it's lasting commitment. I don't hear as much speculation.
Sure. Yeah. So with all the things that have been popping up, I mean, it's been an incredible transformation to, even for me personally, to see a lot of the changes that have happened. It's interesting in York that it doesn't come without, sometimes criticism. And you yourself have kind of faced some of that, unfortunately, with some of the projects that you've done where you've been called a gentrifier or a whitewasher. And you even mentioned that to your face, not just online, but to your face that's been mentioned to you. I mean, what is your response to being called those names? How do you respond to people?
Well, it's something that we need to be concerned with, and inclusion is an absolute necessity to the conversation. And I don't think that we can always do a better job of it. What I've been able to see from my perspective in the real estate development side in the past 18 months, we've seen about 160 new apartments come to downtown. They were vacant buildings before. So although it is gentrification, which has become a negative term, I don't know why. If you look it up, I mean, it's the rebirthing of a building or an area, and that is what we're seeing. But what I'm most excited about is that there have been times where we've had to find alternative locations for people, and we give 6 months notice, and we help them, and we will pay for the move if we need to. Sometimes in development, which we have to do. We make sure that we do everything we can to be as helpful as possible. But I point out that 160 net new apartments in downtown York in the past 18 months. They were vacant buildings, and there are still a lot of vacant buildings. And I encourage anybody that can get into this downtown. I mean, there is a lot more possibility than I think anyone realized in converting office space into residences, or sometimes simply just bringing apartments back online that previously had no chance of being rented just because of the conditions. And we just finished on Friday, we opened the Haynes building, which is catty corner from the Yorktown. And that building, it had 6 apartments and a second floor office. So we renovated the upstairs apartments. I mean, a true renovation. They were uninhabitable. And then we renovated the second floor, which was office, and we renovated it back into apartments. So together we added 10 apartments to downtown, to a building that has been vacant except for H&R Block, it's been vacant for about 15 years.
Okay.
And the upper floor has been vacant for much longer than that. One neat thing, though, on Friday, I think we had 2 or 3 different residents that previously occupied the space come to see it.
Oh, really?
One woman told me she paid $230
Wow.
for an apartment that we're now renting for about $1,295.
Wow.
So again, introductory pricing on apartments is always going to be a little bit higher. The market, you can't compare 25 years ago to today.
Sure.
But, it is neat, and she was blown away by it. We do a lot of work with federal and state historic tax credits, and for that, like this building that we're in today, a lot of times you must keep the historical integrity of the building. So doors, windows, trim. A lot of our building has some really great molding. We have the best carpenters in New York, and I'll put them up against anybody. And for that, we have a skill set in that area, and we were able to bring a lot of the historic components back to the building, and it's crisp. Cool. You go through there and you see the old history, and you get to see what it was like.
Yeah.
When they built it in 1926.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So, I mean, all these projects have taken place. You've either been involved or watched some of these things happen. And York's come a long way in a short period of time. But what do you think the next thing is? What do you think York still needs to kind of keep the momentum going or kind of get to that next level?
We need more of everything.
Yeah.
We need more people. I would argue we still need more restaurants, maybe a more different variety, but more people, number one. More office. We need more offices to commit to downtown. Yes, taxes are high. We all know that. But there are amenities here that you can't get outside of the city, and there are prices here that are lower than you could ever get outside the city. So we need more daytime. We need more nighttime population. And one thing that I'm working on that is going to take a while, but we've talked with the Food Trust out of Philadelphia, is I'd love to see a grocery store downtown. I do patronize Seatown. If anyone is from Seatown listening, I can't buy English muffins at Seatown. And I make a pretty good English muffin breakfast sandwich a few days a week. Okay. And, I have a deodorant that I happen to like that I can't get there. Sure. So these little things that I think we can get there. I know a lot of the members of Central Market are committed to bringing more produce downtown. Yeah. I think the answer is more, and that's good. I want to, as a resident myself, business owner downtown, I want to have more options, selfishly, for my breakfast, lunch, dinner, entertainment needs. So it's happening. I mean, we've come a long way in just 10 years, so I can't wait to see the next 10.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming in to share a little bit of your background and your story with us.
Thanks for having me.
We're excited to see the things to come.
Yeah.
Thanks. If you want to check out more episodes of Catalyst, visit ouryorkmedia.com/catalyst for show notes and more. Thanks so much for listening. Please subscribe at Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts, and bonus points for leaving a review. This project was funded in part by the York Social Venture Challenge grant from the York County Community Foundation. Our title sponsor is York College of Pennsylvania's Center for Community Engagement, with support from Stock and Leader Attorneys at Law. This show is produced by Will Hanlon and Caleb Robertson. I'm Rebecca Hanlon, and you've been listening to Catalyst from Our York Media.